back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Gianna. Hi Gianna, how we doing?
Hi, doing well. Thank you so much.
This is kind of the second time we've trialed this, but we're here again. So if you let us know who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Of course. My name is Gianna. I'm a strength and conditioning coach in Bloomfield, Colorado. I graduated from Regis University with my degree in health and exercise science in 2022 and fell into an internship at Ironworks Performance, which is where I'm still working. We do sports performance with high school and college age athletes. It's a lot of fun. Um, and I find one of the coolest parts about my job is the amount of collaboration I get to do with whether it's sport coaches, PTs, or college coaches. I feel like I'm in a really sweet spot.
On the 6th of December, I'll be hosting a webinar on the practical application of sports science data. There's a lot of talk right now about what to track and how to track it, but in this session, we'll dive into why it matters and how we can make it actionable. It's all about how we can apply it to our athletes, how they can apply it to their sport. At the end of the day, that is what matters. Joining us are Thomas Newman, Teofi Ziemnicki, and Missy Mitchell Macbeth. More about our speakers in the description. This is an incredible lineup which will help guide you through the practical sides of sports science and how we can apply it throughout our athlete's career. To grab your ticket and learn more about the webinar, follow the link in the description and I'll see you there. Yeah, this is something that comes up quite a lot when we talk about private sector S&C and the communication between coaches. How have you managed to sort of foster that and build this relationship with them to the point that they are communicating with you?
Um, well, I think first of all, it's really important that we check our ego as strength coaches. Even though S&C is very, very important, the thing that's going to make these kids better at playing their sport is playing their sport. Like principle of specificity. So, I think I struggled a little bit with holding the reins a little too tight in the beginning of my career, but I think openness inspires openness and reciprocity. So, making an effort to communicate, tagging their coach in different things that they do in the gym. Um, just, I think leading by example, you treat the other coach the way that you would want them to treat you, and hopefully they reciprocate. And if they don't, that's okay. Not all of them do.
Yeah, it's always very interesting because the coach to coach communication is the most important because obviously we need to all consider the loads that's going on either on a training aspect, a playing aspect, and then a training aspect in the gym. How is it that you sort of manage that load management with everything else that they've got going on day to day?
Um, I think programming out too far in advance is a mistake, especially for these kids with really high sport volumes. You just can't, I don't know. You can plan a
Let's
pretty
talk
safe
about
expectation.
periodization.
You can't predict the weather. Like, you have no idea. And especially, like, these kids have so much external stress going on, especially academically. Like, those of them who's their junior year, it's big test season. Like, these kids are really stressed out. So think you have to know your athletes as a coach. You have to make an effort to get to know the kids that you work with. How do they normally act? What do they normally look like when they warm up? What are their energy levels normally like? And we adjust as we go. Um, I think this is also where things like RPE, even if they might not be super accurate for our athletes with lower training ages, can be really useful. And kind of same thing goes around like programming around menstrual cycle or competition season or whatever. Like, just listen to your body. If you feel fatigued, maybe don't go as hard that day.
Yeah, this is something that we've touched on before, and it's that whole periodization plan and how that actually, although it's a good, solid textbook foundation of how like to run programs, but when you get into this real world where you're coaching and like athletes get injured, athletes have tests, athletes have this, and this, like what do you do then? So, like this is something that gets spoken about on the podcast quite a lot, and it's just like have a plan A to Z because you're probably going to need it. As a strength coach and a business owner, my time is quite limited. My favorite part about being a coach is the fact that I get to interact with athletes and be with athletes and really coach them. That's why I use TeamBuildr. I remember the days of searching for exercises, manually typing them in, and spending hours on spreadsheets and organizing my programs. This tends to be quite tedious and a lot of time consuming, which meant that I wasn't able to coach as much. So now for my business, TeamBuildr is a non-negotiable. It's an all-in-one programming platform that lets you create and deliver workouts to your athletes just in a few clicks. With TeamBuildr, I can customize programs, track athletes' progress in real time, and generate performance reports. My athletes get full ownership of their progress and can even share feedback on how they felt the session's going. Having this in place actually gives me more time to coach and be with my athletes. If you're ready to take your next step in your programming, give more time to your athletes, head over to teambuildr.com and use promo code PACHALKUP, that's PACHALQUP, and start your 30-day free trial. What's some of the ways that you sort of maneuver around these different elements of their playing and educational careers?
Like I said, having like an open dialogue with athletes, I feel like is really important. If your athlete is so intimidated by you that they can't tell you that they're, super tired or super sore that day, that's a problem. Your job as a coach to a degree is to be approachable and to foster, again, like that good sense of communication. But I also think it goes like back to basics. Like if I have an athlete that's come in like super fatigued, they're stressed from general life events, like we're just gonna go back to the basics, be like, okay, what demands does their tissue need to handle? Like what is the specific what areas is the specific athlete weak in? Like what meaningful work can we do today? I think being adaptable is
Yeah,
one of
that's the name of the
marketing.
game.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's when we had Tracy Zimmer on the podcast. We spoke in depth in this, and it's like we're always so there's always so many other directions that we need to go in for like the athletes that like you have to become adaptable to every situation that's coming up. You did also like I know personally that you work with a lot of female athletes, and you mentioned the menstrual cycle. How is it being adaptable to that, and what are some of the principles that you hold for coaching them and maneuvering through those hormonal fluctuations?
I don't really overthink it a ton. Again, I'm kind of going by day to day, like how is the athlete coming in feeling, like how are they performing during their warm up. I don't know, how does their top speed look in relation to where it typically sits? That's a good indicator of fatigue for me. Um, Honestly, my biggest thing with the menstrual cycle has been like convincing athletes that no, just because you play a lot of your sport, that doesn't mean it's normal for you to not have a period anymore. You should absolutely still have a period. So I think that's more the conversation that I'm having more of the time.
How
Um,
many of those conversations then lead into the nutritional aspect of it? Because obviously that stops for a plethora of reasons, but mostly because they're overworking their system and they're not getting enough nutrients in there to be able to have that reoccurring every month.
mhm. Yeah, it almost always goes to a nutrition place. I try to start with easy stuff like carbs pre and post workout. Available carbs, like if we think about like low energy availability, that is like it has a drastically negative effect on estrogen. And if we simply don't have enough nutrients to support a healthy uterine lining, like we're not going to make one. But yeah, I think it almost always goes to a place of like available calories and teaching these kids that you need different amounts of food for the different seasons of life that you're in. When you're playing, it matters. You're draining your tank more often when you're doing more physical activity. So you need to replenish it or else you're going to suffer some kind of consequence. Um, but it's difficult, I think, as a strength coach to convince people of that when they've heard from like their
Mhm.
primary care physician that it's okay. And, in a lot of people's minds, like you defer to the doctor. Um, so
Yeah. What's it? How interesting are those then conversations when you're kind of having to be like, no, like they're actually talking bollocks compared to you actually need to eat, and that's not normal.
mhm. um, it can be rough. It also depends on, I think a lot of parents are really good and on it about supporting their kids with eating. And some parents might support more disordered habits unintentionally. Um, so I think that's all part of the dance too. Is like while they are
Learning from both.
athletes, they're still high school age girls, and
Mhm.
I think the desire to be skinny is still very prevalent and seen as desirable. Um,
Yeah. In terms of your programming for the different seasons of like their performance, how do you manage that in relation to like some athletes will have year-round seasons and those that may not? How is it that you break that down?
Um, Kids who have a true off season, like for example, like track and field. I have a thrower and she has like a solid off season. So we ran like a full hypertrophy cluster protocol and then we did a strength
Mm,
block and then now we're coming out into more power and speed stuff and she's sitting in a great place. I mean at like 17 she can free squat like 285 to depth. That's pretty sick.
yeah, that's
So
dope.
yeah, she's also just like some kids, when kids get it, they get it. When they see the results and they're like, I'm hungry for this. Like, I'm totally
Mhm,
willing to put in the work because I'm hungry for the result. She's 100% one of those people. Um, but like for soccer, who's year round, I went to an online seminar recently and was just listening to, ways that other coaches program their athletes because it's so fun to hear how other people run their programming. And I am trying this thing where we did like 3 weeks. It's like a 9 week cycle. 3 weeks of a free squat, 3 weeks of a squat to like a medium height box, and then a 3 weeks off the pins, like a quarter squat.
mhm.
Um, so decreasing range of motion, increasing weight, and everybody seems to be responding pretty well. And everybody loves doing things from a box or from the pins because they get to put a bunch of weight on the bar. And I get to load them super maximally, which I think is really valuable, especially for. It took me a while to learn like what an RPE 10 like true max effort feels like. So I think it's good to get them accustomed to having a lot of weight on their back and feeling like the neurological stimulus of truly driving and using like every available motor unit to get your task done.
Yeah, I think it's super important as well. I've recently spoke to a coach slash researcher, and we were talking about like 110s to 115s, 20% RMs, but like just unrocking, taking a step or two back, and then rocking it again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that importance of that neural feedback on, okay, this is how it feels like. When I get to this weight, then I'll become more comfortable because I know what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So like stressing it that way as well is super important because it gives you that perception of what it actually feels like. So I agree. You also mentioned like the hypertrophy clusters and the strength and power block. Can you sort of break that down and exactly what you did and how that sort of played out?
Yeah, so I a while ago bought and ran Hypertrophy Clusters by Jake Tura myself, and I loved it. I think well, it's fun because there's still jumping and sprints in that program, but it is very much hypertrophy focused. And I really like Jake Tura. I found him because he's got a lot of good free content about tendons, and then I ended up going more into his stuff from there.
Is
Um,
this it?
Yes. So hypertrophy clusters is an insane amount of volume. It's like for your main lift, it's 8 sets of 5. Um, so
Wow.
it's a lot. So like she ran that with a front squat, which if you've ever done 8 sets of 5 of front squat, it's terrible.
Oh, it
Um,
sucks. I've never run eight, but I know it sucks.
it's awful. But yeah, she responds really well to a lot of volume. She's just a workhorse and she knows how to recover. She knows how to take care of her body like a grown up. And that's one of the reasons why I think she sees such great results. But yeah, so it was, the main lift for an 8x5, upper lower splits of 4 days a week. And her Wednesday was just like a recovery day. Do some lists, just keep blood moving. Um, but yeah, I mean, her squat 1 RM went up, her bench 1 RM went up. Yeah, I think it was great. And I think
Yeah.
that we might get a little caught up in just being the strength aspect of strength and conditioning, but a lot of these girls, especially, like they need to get bigger.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this is something that we've spoken about before as well. Is like giving athletes confidence to continuously develop themselves, but to also feel confident in the body that they need to grow into, and not the body that's always seen as acceptable in society.
Hmm. Yeah, you're not supposed to look like a little girl for your whole life.
Yeah, Like, and I think we've spoken about this before as well. Is like Iona Mar is the best example of this. Like her stuff during the Olympics was like, yeah, I'm 30% body fat,
Hmm.
but I'm an Olympian,
Yeah.
and she's a bronze like medalist now. So it's like you can't really take that away from her.
Hmm. Yeah, and she's on Dancing with the Stars now.
She is. I keep seeing her clips, and it's so funny.
Yeah, she's great, and she's just authentically herself, which is really what like I think a lot of young people in general, not just young girls, need to realize that you are
Exactly.
unique for a reason, and that's so valuable. Like we need your uniqueness.
Hmm. And it's like it's showing that strength is also acceptable, and that is something like obviously for strength you need size, and then they kind of works like together. So it's not like you can be petite and express these bouts of strength.
Hmm.
So it's really sick to see her being like, yeah, I'm powerful as shit.
Hmm.
In terms of the strength and power block, what did you just do for for her specifically on that?
We did for bench. We did a pin press, which I feel
Okay.
like we got really good results from, like just almost right off her chest. Just in terms of like upper body rate of force development, I was a huge fan. Um, and then we did like a Hatfield reverse lunge for a single leg stem. Um, Again, Hatfield variations sometimes freak me out, and I don't have all my athletes do them. But she's been training long enough that she knows how to manage the bar on her back and knows how to adjust if things feel sketchy or not. Um, and then I mean she's always running something that's power based. I'm thinking like she had a split jerk in there, the clean was in there, so it's never
How did
completely
you teach that?
biased toward one end of the
How,
spectrum.
yeah, how did you teach those Olympic lifts?
Um, I've definitely considered a lot since our last conversation, and I think I coach much less.
Mm,
I think the less cues I give, the more the athletes get out of it. And again, watching a demonstration is, I think, what our brain likes the best anyway. Um, yeah, so
100%,
I've.
and that's what it's about. It's like just see how they like the more cueing you give them, the more likely they are like the more likely they are to add something extra. Unless like unless it's absolutely needed. Like if it's something that you see that's like let's not do that. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Yeah, the jerk I feel like is like relatively simple, like dip drive. I'm leaving it there, punch through the ceiling. But yeah, the clean I've really just your cue of deadlift it fast. It's
Hmm.
it's pretty valuable, and instead of focusing on like first pull, second pull, transition, it's too much noise in your brain for that short amount of time.
Hmm. This is something that like again I've come to know from just different coaching experiences I've had, and it's like a lot of people spend too much time like breaking it down move by move. It's like in the athlete's brain is like okay, I have to do this, then I go into this,
Hmm.
then this, then this, and this. So I'm like, let's try and get away from that. It's like easy speak. Like pretend that everyone that you talk to is dumb. They're not. But it's like, how can I make it the simplest possible so that they cannot get it wrong? So it's like deadlift it fast, go into a shrug with your tippy toes up, and then you pull it till you can't go anymore. So that's an upright row. You drop underneath, you front squat it, and then you punch the air. So it's like it's lifts that they know. So it's not like I'm having to teach them the same moves but named differently. That's again harder because you're having to teach more words and teach different things. It's really lazy because like I'm not doing that much, but it's more effective.
And also, athletes know when they didn't do something right. Like when they do a shitty rep, like they feel it. So I think there's also like motor behavior wise, there's more value in letting them feel it out for themselves and
Hmm.
figuring things out, and like they know how they feel in their body. They know that they caught it too far forward. Like give them a chance to correct it on their own before you like jump down their throat with more cues.
100%. I don't think I mentioned this to you, but like for me, if I see an athlete has done something wrong and they know they did something wrong, and I'm like, what do you think it was?
Hmm.
Like I give them the opportunity to a correct it verbally, but then being like, okay, then I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So like my favorite one is when people like you mentioned, they catch it too far forward, or they actually hit the bar with the hips, and then like the bar swings out in front. Like, okay, so what happened there? And they're like, I think I actually like hit off my hips. Exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
what are we going to do next? Like, not hit off my hips.
Yeah,
Yes, nailed it.
totally. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, like these athletes are smart and they're like very attuned to their own bodies. So like, I don't know, have a little faith in them.
Yeah, yeah. That's what it's about as well. Is like you have to give them that control over their performance. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I planned it, but they have to do the reps. They have to do the sets. Like the performance is there. They're in there to get as much as possible. If they don't, that's more on them than it is me. But it's also that control over like that performance is yours. Whatever you achieve is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
and then,
also mentioned, sorry, go on.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
You've also mentioned that like because you do coach predominantly females, you actually get to see that shift behind that timid at first, but then they'll boss the boys about. Can you
Mm-hmm.
give us a little background behind that and how that all plays out?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the athletes in our gym are male. Like vast majority, like probably triple the amount of female athletes that we have. So it's an intimidating environment to walk into. I know I was intimidated when I came for my internship, and I'm an adult, so it can be nerve wracking, especially for like middle school age girls to come in, especially when it comes to getting equipment. I think a lot of them are intimidated to take something that they feel like isn't theirs or that somebody else like might potentially be using in a little bit. And it's very, very cool to see the longer they're in the gym. They just not the walking around like they own the place necessarily, but you can see that they're so confident, and there's no second guessing whether or not they should be taking up that space or using that piece of equipment or telling a guy to stop resting on the machine that they're supposed to be using. um, and this isn't to say that I'm like fostering, I don't know, a sense of, I don't know, confrontation in my female athletes, but they're confident enough
Again,
where they feel like they have the agency to be able to, ask for what they need or go get what they need and take care of themselves. And I think that that's a principle that will serve them like later in their lives very well.
especially with athletes, like if they're confident normally, then when it becomes their time to perform, they're going to feel that.
Mm-hmm. And it translates everywhere, the confidence part. And I think that like training for performance almost always has positive aesthetic correlations. Like having muscle tends to look good. It tends to be a desirable aesthetic. Um, so it's cool to see how they value the training. They see the training's effect on their sport. They also see the training's effect on their body, and they want more. And a
Mm,
lot of times initially when parents come in, they're like, "Well, we don't want her to get too bulky." And I'm like, "Well, first of all, it's going to take a really long time. Secondly, like I hope you would want her to gain some muscle.
mm,
Going to help her live a
perform.
better life, not just now, but way down the line." So I think it's cool to see that muscle becomes something desirable, or they see a video of themselves and they're like, "Look at my quads." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, isn't that so cool? Isn't that so much cooler than being skinny?" Nobody's ever like, "Look at my thigh gap." Like,
Yeah. When I think I saw this on Joey Swole's Instagram, and it was a girl that like she tensed her tricep and she saw the little line and she got shocked,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, that's fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's literally the best feeling is unprompted when the kid is like, "I really feel like I have bigger muscles," or "I really feel like I'm stronger," and they're so excited about it. Um, placing more value in what your body can do
Mm.
instead of what it looks like or what other people think about it. Like, what can your body do for you?
Yeah, 100%. And like that's the name of the game. Like when you're like 80, can you still maneuver yourself around? And like that's what I would like to think that I'm teaching my athletes is like the longevity of not just their performance, but like later in life, are they more likely to fall and break a hip or catch themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Like I will choose catch yourself every single time.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this the last time I was on, but I had a lab partner in college who was a couple years older than I was. This was in our exercise phys lab. And we ended up getting to do, I forget what the ultrasound machine is called, but we did a bone mineral density scan at like the calcaneus. So like you rest your foot in this ultrasound machine and then passes the waves through that bone, tells you how dense it is. I want to say at the time I was like 18 or 19. And she was like 22, and she already had osteopenia because she had had such severe anorexia when she was in high school. So that's like, this is a real pressing issue. And when we think about puberty, like you're laying foundational bone matrix, like you're setting the ceiling for how dense your bones can be for your entire life. So
Yep.
it's a big gamble it's literally gambling with your agency for the rest of your life, with your autonomy. Like, do you want to be in a nursing home and be taken care of, or do you want to take care of yourself?
Yeah. Which then brings me back to a question I asked before, like with all year-round athletes, how do you ensure that they are getting the best that they can for obviously like the constraints? They don't have like true off season, pre-seasons. They just go out full out the whole way around.
It's difficult for sure, and some kids do a better job at managing, especially like I think the spring, like if we talk about soccer, is the worst because their club calendar is still running and they're playing high school. Um, so some kids manage that better than others. Like they bring food with them wherever they go. That's a huge one. I'm like, that's just like general tips. Like if you're an athlete who's going to school, you should absolutely have non-perishable snacks in your backpack all the time. You should always have available food, always, especially carbs. But like starting with things like that, talking about sleep, I try to run a weekly check-in during the spring, especially just to
Mhm.
see what everybody's game volume is like. Especially because with the snow, club games get moved around a lot, um, and I don't know. I'm not 100% like all over my athletes about getting in during that time. They have so much stress going on that I'm happy to see them if they can make it in once a week. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be, I don't know, an
Like
extra
you
source of
must come in.
stress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've explained like, especially for my older girls, like they know how important it is to strength train, and that's why they make it a priority once or twice a week, even when they're super busy. Um, but yeah, it's not my job to be like mad at my athletes because they're not coming to see me. They're very busy.
Yeah. And like the thing is like stress is stress. It doesn't matter if it's physical or mental. It's going to have the same effect on the body.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're then pushing your athletes to come in when they've got exams, they've got a game at the weekend, they might have two games at the weekend, and then you're forcing them to come in and do the gym. Like something at some point is going to break.
Mm-hmm.
Whether
And that's an
it's
ego thing. If that's 100% an ego thing. If a coach needs to see a kid, um, yeah,
I think it's that whole thing is that's my athlete. I did that. And I'm just like, but you didn't. You provided the plan.
yeah.
You provide the plan and they do it. They show up, they show out, they perform. So like, I mean, yeah, it's just one of those that. And the thing is, like, it's you can't. How do you manage that? Like, how can we identify it and then tell the coach or the athlete, like, you're not doing a great job because like you're making it about you when it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do we assess our performance as coaches? And I think this is something that Steph Mock Grubs she mentioned on the podcast is like how how do we evaluate each other and ourselves to say actually this season went well because the program's good or this season didn't go well because we messed up at some point of it. Like how do we assess that?
Yeah. I think we all have like our KPIs. Um, so keeping an eye on like measurable data. Are we improving?
Mhm.
If I think if you're not taking data, I don't know what you're doing. Like
That's exactly why I created this. Like I'm putting on this webinar, is like how can we actually assess our sports science data that we all love to collect now, but like make it applicable, like why we're doing it and how to make it as precise as we can for what we need. And I think it's like having the people that's coming off, like Thomas Newman and Tofi worked at Yale when they started winning their season. like they change the program around. And like Missy mentioned about Beth, her whole thing is
Mhm.
like athlete to coach relationships and how to get the best out of your athletes. So like having that as a pairing is like we get all the science, the sports science, but then how do we take care of our athletes based on all of this?
Mhm. I think that is where it's hard to like stay objective, because especially like the more you get to know an athlete, I think you see, I don't know, as you see like personal growth in addition to growth in the weight room, and I think that's also a mark that you're doing something right, and
Mm,
that you get closer with your athletes over time. If your athletes don't desire a connection with you, then maybe you're not. Um, I don't know,
exactly.
creating an environment where they feel comfortable doing that, and that's a problem.
100%. What KPIs are you measuring throughout?
Top speed always. And then broad jump is another one of mine. Um, but really, most of my girls, I'm really just concerned about maintaining and developing single leg strength through a full range of motion in different planes. And that's like always in. And I don't, that's not like a KPI, but something that is always important to me in my programming and that I tend to be a little bit more concerned about if I see deficits there or I don't know a decrease in strength or control. That's I'd be probably more concerned about that than seeing
Yeah.
like
I
sprints.
would I will argue on this because I do think that's a KPI because again the name is key performance indicators, and if you value the strength of single leg or single limb activity, that's a good KPI. Like
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking that I don't have like for pistols. There's not like a way to really like measure them. Like the reps are just done. Um,
you can load.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Like
Um,
if you can then go overhead, you can then like overhead's probably the hardest one. You
mhm.
can go front rack position, side loaded. You can measure it.
I guess I just mean that like I don't know why sprint speed seems like more of a continuous like
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I just have more general data for it, like over
I do
years.
think that's what's hard is like it's easier to collect data on speed than it is bodily movement
Yeah.
because like again fluctuations will happen. Like if they're tired that day, they're probably not going to lift as much
Hmm.
as they might run. Like sometimes you run the best when you're tired, and sometimes you lift really heavy when you're tired. Like sometimes that's just what it is.
Hmm.
And I've actually started using that sometimes as indicators to like push them a little bit or like completely back off. If I notice that, so one of my KPIs is jump. If I can see my athletes are jumping similar to what their are like maxes are, like I'm like, yeah, let's
Hmm.
push. You said you're tired, but you're jumping all right, so let's push. If they're say they're tired and they're jumping poorly, I'm like, yeah, we're having an easy session. Let's reduce all the load.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where I'd love to get something like velocity based training, some kind of
Mm,
system for that, especially with single leg stuff, because maybe that's what I'm thinking. Like yeah, they did a pistol again, but it was kind of slower than last week, and I don't really have a way to quantify that right now. Um,
mm. So it also depends how much you have available to you. So this is something that I'm looking at just now as well. Is like I love VBT and it's a really solid way to test your athletes, but there's not a lot of devices out there that can measure everything that we want, like
mhm,
from jump, pistol squats, bar paths, like bar speed. Sorry, like the only one that I found it's someone that I'm trying to get close to is Perch. Like they're a camera based, velocity based device, and what they do is like they measure key key landmarks. So if it's a bar, like they'll take the image of the bar and they'll see how fast it moves. But you can
mhm.
also like landmark your body, you'll put your height, your weight, your I'm not sure if they do leg length as well. But like you put all these indicators in and then you sort of you can do all that. Now it's pricey, but
Yeah, it looks very cool though. I'm looking at it right
yeah,
now. Very fancy.
like, so they're partnering up with me for the webinar
Very cool. No
and
strings or anything.
no, nothing. Like you don't
That's
even
very
get that
interesting.
noise from the string vibrating. So But the thing is, like, they are pricey, but they're kind of a golden standard because they can do so much. Like, you can
Mhm.
jump in there, you can measure your bar speed, you can look at sort of movement speeds and all that stuff. Like, you can. That's another way to measure a piston squat. Like, how fast are they doing it?
Mhm.
Because yes, they can squat, but some squats will be slower than others. So how can we measure that too? So Perch is definitely a good one to
Yeah,
measure that as well.
that looks very nice. And also, just thinking about like things that I look for in the spring, how sick are they, and how often are they getting sick,
Mm,
and when they get sick, how long does it take for them to stop coughing? Because I don't know, a lot of those like
that's
lingering
important.
respiratory stuff, it sticks around for a long time. So
Do
that's
you
another.
recommend any sort of like vitamins and all that stuff for them to take during this time, or like special care that they should be taking of themselves?
Um, for those of them that travel all the time, my biggest thing is just making sure they stay hydrated. I don't think a lot
Mm,
of athletes know how dehydrating flying is. Um, and when we're dehydrated, we know that we cannot perform. Even like 1 to 5% dehydrated dehydration has like drastically negative effects on performance. So that's just like easy low hanging fruit. I tend to not recommend supplements because I think, well, first of all, not everything is tested. So I don't
mhm,
know. Supplements freak me out a little bit. I'm all for creatine and like you want to take some magnesium glycinate, like cool. You have low iron, take it. I don't know.
mhm,
Um, but I don't really recommend like a women's or teen like multivitamin or anything like that. Just try to have carbs, protein, color, vary your source of color in your meals, and make sure you drink enough water. And then I do have a connection with a dietitian at Children's, and I've referred a couple athletes to her
mhm,
just because she knows more than me, and I think dietitians are just so incredibly smart and so incredibly valuable. Just the way that they can plan like nutrient timing and pairing different foods to meet athlete needs, like that's something that I could never hope to do. So I'm always happy to refer out for stuff like
mhm.
that.
No, I agree. The only reason I say is because like vitamins is one of those that you can kind of get away with many of them. Like if you're having much of one, the worst thing that's going to happen is just pee it out.
Hmm.
So like vitamins is always something that I do recommend athletes look into, but like again, make sure it's safe for sport. Like I've had athletes come up to me and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm taking like some supplement to sleep," and I'm like, first off, you shouldn't be admitting that to me. Second of all, you should get yourself to the nutritionist right now and tell her what you're taking. Because if you get tested and you pop positive, we're fucked. So let's go.
Yeah. Oh God.
Athletes are wild. Like the thing is like even during like movements and liftings, like they are the best cheaters. Like they will find the easiest way to do something, even if
100%.
like you've already given them the easiest way to do something, they will find a way.
Hmm.
So it's like kind of need to be a little bit smarter here.
Hmm. Apply more constraints to more places. Um, Gosh, I was gonna ask you something and then it just left my head.
What was
Um,
it on?
it was about menstrual cycle stuff.
Okay,
How do you
I
program around the menstrual cycle? Do you?
yeah, you do, I do, and I hate saying this because it always feels like a cop out, but I do have an explanation. But it depends. It depends. Some female athletes just don't need anything. You can just drive them the normal program. Other athletes that perhaps like have heavier cycles or more painful cycles, you need to maneuver that differently. So what I mean by that is if they are losing like a lot of blood, they have heavier flows, they'll probably need to line the load and uptake more nutrients. So that's when I've never told an athlete you need to eat this, but I would advise you to. Like I
Hmm.
always advise, I don't necessarily tell them what they can and can't do. And it's like that thing of if like an experienced nutritionist, 100% send them to them straight away. but I like to look at undulating periodization model for female athletes because then you've got a little bit more flexibility and when they push hard, when they don't, and
Mhm.
like anywhere in between. So what I would recommend would be sort of having that undulating periodization. So it goes light, medium, heavy, super heavy. So 2 weeks before they're usually at their strongest. Not always, but most women are at their strongest during those 2 weeks before their period.
Mhm.
So what I've looked into just now, and it works reasonably well most of the time. There's obviously those outliers. Is push them super heavy week one. So we're going the 2 weeks as after their period. The week after, that's like the start for me.
Mhm.
So we'll go super heavy. We'll then go medium. Then they're on their periods, so light, and then coming off, they're into their heavy. Then it goes super heavy, medium, light, and then just based on that. But it's again, it's a trial and error, and it's very individual because not all women's cycles are the same. But even within the same woman, 4 months could look completely different to each
Yeah.
other. So it's also that coach to athlete relationship and how you can communicate the different phases of it. So it takes a bit of honesty, and honestly, questionnaires are your best friends for this because like they're not having to update you every single day like
Mhm.
verbally. They can just be like, feel good, feel shit on it or whatever.
Mhm.
So it's given them a little bit more power to be as expressive as they want to be through that, and then you can program accordingly.
Mhm. I like that. That's a good idea. I like
Is that something?
undulating periodization in general, I think.
Mm. See, the thing that I like about it too is like you can look at it from a yearly and seasonal way as well. Like that's not the only periodization plan I have. Like I a big fan of triphasic as well. Some of the variability of um, West Side, I fucking love that too. Like it's just taking the best parts from what I need. That's what I do. But like with undulating, you can look at something like menstrual cycle and adapt it to that. But you can look at a season and
Mhm.
also be like, okay, let me get their schedule. Let me see what the easy games are. Let me see what the hard games are. And then even during the season, you can kind of microdose improvements. So like if they've got an easy game coming up, I'm going to give them more load so that they can improve. So
Mhm.
I'll amp up the strength, I'll amp up some of the running stuff because chances are they probably won't get that stimulus during the game. So I'll give that stimulus throughout the week so that when it comes to game day, they do the game well, they win, and then they sort of have the same load outputs than their hardest games. Because like the name of the game is keeping the load the same throughout so that they can keep sort of improving.
Mhm.
So like Angeline periodization is a good model to sort of base more than just key improvements. Because like again, block is just like you do this, and this linear. It keeps progressing, but like with elite athletes, like that 1% improvement is fucking perfect if you
Yeah.
have it every single year. Like a 1% increase yearly, fucking unreal.
Yeah.
So the name of the game then becomes like, can I keep my athletes progressing and again keep them in their sport as healthy as possible? And again, we can't mitigate, like, we can't prevent injuries, but we can mitigate most of it.
Mhm.
So like then my programming sort of changes into like a true type basic, which like eccentrics, like isometrics, eccentrics, concentrics, and then I've further developed that into like coming into plyometrics, plyometrics, and then ballistics,
Mhm.
because like we also need them to be able to perform better than when they got injured. So then like you have to be ballistically sound to come back and still play at the same level.
Yeah. I don't know what things are like over there. If you have like a Like there's no standardized protocol here for like releasing an athlete for return to play after ACL. Like if their strength matches like 90 whatever percent of their other leg, then it's fine. But you don't need to pass any plyometric tests really. There's like a single leg horizontal jump test just to see if you can load your quad dynamically, but nothing that nearly replicates the speed and demands
Mhm.
of sport. I just had an athlete who I'd only seen her like for a handful of private sessions over the summer. Soccer player, had torn her ACL twice. Again, like I saw her like 3 or 4 times. And I got a text from her a couple weeks ago, and she tore her ACL again. Third complete tear on that knee. Full replacement. And her
Wow.
meniscus. She's 17. But it's like I can't
So,
help but feel like getting them back to baseline is not enough. They got
mhm,
hurt at baseline. Baseline is not strong enough. So why are we satisfied with just getting them back to their non-surgical leg?
mhm. So I think there's two things at play there, and it's that thing of one, it's the knowledge. Like the knowledge just isn't there. Like if you take a look at research, like most of them aren't doing this type of research on elite athletes. They're doing it on clinical patients that are just used to being normal.
Mhm.
That's There's nothing wrong with normal, but it's just like the baseline. Like you can walk, you can move. That's what we want. That's perfect. But like our athletes stress themselves to the point of exhaustion and then some, right? So it's that thing of we need to them, and then it goes again. Like I had Tim on, who's like a researcher, and he does specifically like plyometrics, Olympic weightlifting, eccentric stuff. And it's like when it comes to research, to do plyometrics, you need to lift double your body weight or you fucking explode, right? It's not true. Anyone can jump. Like everyone can jump. But it's just whether it's efficient or not. So then when it comes to return to play, it's like this again, this is like a protocol that I heard from Rob Anderson, who's a phenomenal coach. But like I've kind of developed it into a little bit of my own, and it's like eccentrics, coming out of eccentrics, working in that concentric phase, plyometric, like coming into plyometrics, ballistics, and that gives you like the freedom to then do skiers, do like continuous skiers, and then just like make sure that you've got that RSI, like quick jumps in there at a rate that you can at a speed, sorry, that you can like be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm confident, and it gives them the confidence enough to be like, my knee will hold out, because like a lot of the injury process as well is like psychology. Like
Yes.
if I get hurt again, I'm going to have to go back to the whole thing, and I don't want that, so I'm going to protect it. So like our job then also becomes like giving them the confidence to know that they can also move and do things that they were used to, but they had to stop because of this. Now they can again, and they're stronger.
Hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, kind of.
Okay.
Yes.
What part
Um,
did I not answer?
I think, yeah, I guess I've just seen, and it depends what physical therapy facility they come from.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, if they're
but
effective at
yeah,
bringing them
I've,
back.
yeah,
Yeah. So.
I've gotten a handful that have, like, I can tell by when I have them do their walking lunge, which ACL they tore. And I'm like, you should
Mm,
not, like, my eye is not that trained. Like, like if I can tell, like, with my naked vision, which side your injured side was, like, that's a problem. It probably means that
mm.
you have a lot more work to do. Um,
I'll give Josh Chunga a shout on this one, and I'll put his Instagram up too. Like, if I ever have any questions on like rehab and like bringing people back, like I will always direct it to him. Like he is unreal, and he's kind of the guy
oh,
that
I follow Josh.
he's unreal,
Yeah.
and
The
like
ballistic input stuff, the FRC stuff that for hamstrings and shoulders, I love it. Yeah, he's so smart.
he
So
is
smart.
like even speaking to him, you're just like, yeah, that makes sense. He's actually so I love experimenting with myself, like always, and I've had shoulder dislocations, so benching for me sucks ass. Like it sucks. But because I like to mess around with things, I put fag grips on the bench, like on the bar, and I just benched, and I was like, huh, no pain. And I was like, why? So like I shot him a message straight away. I was like, hey, this has happened. I felt no pain. Like, why? What's going on here? And he was honest as well. He was like, I'm not 100% how it works, but it's something to do with the thumb positioning because you are like a little bit more open. The
Mm-hmm.
nerve that sort of runs through isn't aggravated as much. So that's maybe why you're feeling no pain there. And I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah,
So like,
very interesting.
yeah, having someone to refer people to is also a really important thing. So
Mm-hmm.
like, I think I messaged him a couple like last month or a couple months ago, and I was like, recovery, like for recovery, like what's your thoughts on the? Have you seen those compression socks that like go up to your quads and like they squeeze air and like they flush everything out? I was like, well, they're good in a sense that they do push blood forward and backwards. Now, whether it's effective or not, I don't think so. It's just more of a need to get your athletes to essentially relax.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you've got a bunch of them and like your athletes can all sit in a circle and just talk and just like
Yeah,
chill. Like
that's
that's
the real
probably
value. Like just
yeah,
the being relaxed and in community.
yeah. So like he's someone I pick my like his brain a lot because it's like he's doing it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what I value. Like he's constantly doing it and he's constantly like experimenting with himself.
Yeah, and he tore his meniscus relatively recently, didn't he?
Hmm.
Messing around with something,
Yeah,
or he does jujitsu, doesn't he?
yeah,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
stolen
So,
a couple things from him, like a lot of his work in deep knee flexion.
mhm.
Um, I had an athlete with a partially torn meniscus, and I like stole a bunch of his stuff for her programming.
It's good though. Like the thing is as well is like back to what you asked. I think in the public setting, they're so overwhelmed with how many people they have to see that your care isn't always like at the forefront of what they want. So they will make sure that the tests that you have to pass are passed well, relatively well enough to say you're fine,
Mm-hmm.
but they won't go beyond that. Whereas if you go private, where obviously now you're having to pay a little bit more, but you have someone that actually cares for what your goal is, I think they will test you a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that depends on their knowledge base and what they think is good enough.
And also, that person you're probably working directly with the physio instead of some kind of assistant, or your
Mhm.
physio working on 3 or 4 clients at a time. And that's just like part of that is just like, at least here, it's just like the American healthcare system sucks, and like
Mhm.
insurance limits the amount of care that a physical therapist can give an athlete. So,
Yeah,
um,
so here, from my experience, the NHS has specific packets for whatever is sore, and then they send that out. So, say your shoulder is sore, they give you the like
the
interior,
shoulder
exterior,
packet.
yeah, and that's like, well, it doesn't matter if you tore your it doesn't matter what side, like if it's anterior or exterior or posterior, like they'll give you the same packet regardless. So we get a lot of that where it's like, okay, cool, but that's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't do much. So yeah, CrossFit isn't as well thought out as possible either, but we get free healthcare.
True.
So
True.
I mean,
I think that I wish it was just more of a natural like pipeline, I guess, to
mhm,
go from being in physical therapy to going to strength and conditioning, because I'm not here to like talk poorly about physical therapists, but I think where they tend to lack the most is the exercise prescription aspect. And that's where we are like that's our whole wheelhouse is the
mhm.
exercise prescription. So, I've been fortunate to work with some really nice PTs. Um, like who have like come in and like come into the gym like while my athlete's there, see what I'm doing, you know, like a true collaboration. And that's so nice because we both get to learn and the athlete is better
Mhm.
for it, which is the whole point of everything. It's not
Yep.
about either of our business. It's about helping this kid get back to the field, perform well, and stay healthy. But yeah, I think some parents get it, and some physical therapists get it. But it's sad to see kids just go to physical therapy and then come out, play for a little bit, get injured again, go back to physical therapy, and they're very young. And I don't like to use the term like wear and tear because I don't really believe in it, but absolutely obliterating the
Mhm.
connective tissue in your knee in a traumatic way more than once doesn't bode well for your mobility later in life.
100%. And the thing is, as well, back to like an earlier point, with female athletes specifically, because they're having to go, and at the risk of sounding sexist, like women can't deal with the same loads men can. Like our tendons are stronger, they are
Mhm.
thicker, they are bigger,
Yeah.
but having females go off the same true all season, all year round season isn't load manageable for them.
Mhm.
Like, so loads are having to be a little bit more specific to what they need in order to not become injured.
Yeah.
Like, if I would have an athlete that's an all year round athlete, I'm probably going to limit the amount of running I'm going to give her. Like, I will keep it to the bare minimum because I know on pitch side she'll probably do more than is needed. So I will dose everything right back to basics. Like, I'll give them three sets, three running sets, or three sets of plyos, or whatever it is, to make sure that she's still able to get that stimulus,
Mhm.
but to keep her load reduced enough so that she can actually go on and have longevity in her season.
Mhm. And also, young females have this tendon and ligament laxity that during puberty that men don't. So it's just like an extra like nail in the coffin almost, where it's like you're set up in this position where, especially if you're underweight and you're not strong, which parents, you know, when your kid is not strong, like you know when your like when your kid struggles to help you bring in the groceries, like that's a problem. They probably need to
Mhm.
hit the gym. But so it's like we're set up in this place where we know that girls are at higher risk for this, especially if they play one sport all year round, especially if they specialized like in or before middle school and they have this tendon and ligament laxity. But S&C is kind of like bottom of the barrel in terms of activities for them to get involved in. Um, and I think it's just an education piece.
Mhm.
Um, because again, like I've said so many times, once the kids get it, they get it and they're hungry for more. Um, like I have a lacrosse athlete right now who referred from physical therapy because her patella keeps dislocating. She has very, very weak quads, and a shallow patellar groove, whatever that groove is called. So her PT recommended strength and conditioning. So she's been coming to see me for a while. And then she saw her ortho last week, and her ortho was like, I don't think it's a good idea that you're doing strength and conditioning. I think it's too much. And I was like, I respectfully disagree with your orthopedic surgeon. um,
Wow.
and I was like, well, how do you feel? And she was like, well, I feel much stronger. And I was like, well, you decide.
I mean, when I dislocated my shoulder, yeah, my orthopedic surgeon also told me to not do anything, and like my surgery was 2 years and a half afterwards. So for 2 years and a half, I was like, yeah. So what do I do? He's like, you just have to relax. And then obviously because I've been used to like performing at such a like high level like throughout like before the injury, like depression became a really big part of that then.
Yeah.
Because like that's my identity was this. Now I can't do this. Then who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah. They don't have the. I don't think they have the knowledge to talk on that.
Yeah.
Even though they should know it because like it's something very simple.
Mm-hmm. And that has a very direct effect on bones. Strength training does. So, um, but I think hearing stuff like that used to really discourage me. Like I when I first started out, like I had a couple PTs and coaches who like didn't want girls to come see me because they were gonna get hurt. Um, and now it's kind of nice to be in a place where I can just You know, if you want to listen to your orthopedic surgeon, like you can, but how do you feel? Like really pay
Mhm.
attention to like how you feel. I'm not going to say anything to you. I'm not going to try to convince you of this value because I think you see it already. Um,
I'll tell you a funny story. So I have a client who she was having a lot of so she was essentially on her period for like a whole year. Like a whole year. She went to like her GP and her GP was like, "Are you pregnant?" No. Like, have you got any STDs? No. Like that's the questions that she was getting every single time.
mhm.
I was then like, okay, like give me a food diary. Like just let's just look at what you're intaking. And she was like, she was consuming so much caffeine throughout the day that I was like, how is your heart not stopped? Like I was genuinely like, how like she was having like 2 or 3 cans of Monster, and she was having like coffees on top of that too. And I was like,
Gosh.
fuck, like that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's cut it. Like let's completely cut it. Like just to see what happens. She comes back like a couple of weeks later and she was like, oh, like I'm normal now, like I'm regular. Like, okay, well, here we are. Like caffeine's not great for that either.
Yeah. But it's like you as a strength coach had the thought to be like, oh, let's take this very basic step and see what this person is consuming in a day. Yeah, it's kind of shocking, like going to the doctor for really anything as a woman. It's like related to, yeah, are you pregnant? Do you have an STD? It's probably anxiety. I think you just need to
Or
drink
you're just
water.
hormonal. I
Yeah,
fucking hate that one too. Oh, it
just
pisses me off.
hormonal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I always ask my athletes and clients to like just give me a food diary. Let's just see what you take. Like I don't care if you eat sweets. I don't care if you eat
Yeah.
chocolate. Like a whole bar of chocolate, cool. I'm also honest with my like athletes. Like if I have a tub of ice cream, I will tell them. Like one of my daily questions when I'm signing out somewhere is like, "What's your favorite ice cream flavor?" He'll tell me. I'm like, "Oh, I've smashed the whole tub of this before." And like
Yeah.
it kind of like they kind of look at me as like, "Am I allowed to be honest about this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess."
Yeah.
Like I don't care what you put in this food diary, just give me one. Like
Hmm.
if you eat terribly, I do not care, but I can only advise and like send you to the right people depending on what you put in, and you have to be honest.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like I'd never give out like you need to eat this, 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 and this. I'd never do that. But I will be
Hmm.
like, maybe let's look at this, or
Hmm.
like I'll be like, you need to see a nutritionist right now.
I had an athlete who I saw just for like a little bit, volleyball player. Whenever we would do really anything high intensity, like if it was jumping or sprinting, anything like that, super nauseous, like green, lightheaded. And so of course, like my first place is like available carbs. Like, did you eat before? Um, and anyway, like ended up getting into conversation, talked to her dad, and then I referred them to that dietitian, and she has ARFID, which is like auto restrictive food intake disorder. So like her body won't like let her eat outside of her certain group of like safe foods, which is why she keeps losing weight. Um, and she's getting a bunch of headaches and uh, like her muscle soreness lasts for a really long time. And like this is all probably food related. So she's been working with a dietitian for a little bit and is going to come back.
Uh,
But it's just I don't know. It's interesting how little people know about how their own body works.
hmm Oh, when you ask an athlete like, where do you feel this, and they're like, I don't know.
Everywhere.
Fantastic.
What?
Yeah. Or sometimes like they'll be like, oh, I've got a really sore quad today. I'm just like, if your quad's up there, I'm concerned.
Yeah. Where did you see that? Who told you that? Um, but I was having a conversation with a parent randomly about like packing snacks for tournament days. And I was like, just make sure she has a lot of available carbs. And she was like, so like bread? And I was like, well, like, yeah, but I'm thinking more like fruit. Like, and she was like, I didn't know that there were carbs in fruit. And I was like, wow, our education system has truly failed the general public.
Mm. It's the same as like people get sometimes shocked when I'm like, yeah, smash it like a small bag of Haribos at halftime. Just like
Mhm.
handful, shove them in your mouth and chow down and go play. Like they're fast acting, they will get you there.
Yeah.
Like
Or a
my
Rice Krispie treat.
no, so nice. Honey
So good.
stingers. Oof.
So good. God, love honey stickers.
My brother is the worst for this. Like he will call me like 5 hours before a game and be like, "Hey, I've got a game in 5 minutes. It's a big game. What do I do?" I'm like, "Well, fucking phone me yesterday and let's talk." And then like I'm like, "What? 5 hours? What? Like, have a big breakfast. Make sure you get as much carbs as possible. In between now and then, try and go to the bathroom so you're
Mhm.
not going during the game, and then half hour before go banana, and then halftime either orange. Make sure you have electrolytes on pitch
Mhm.
side. Smart harbos right
Yeah.
before you go into second half.
I've had parents like concerned about the amount of sugar in Gatorade, and I'm like,
Mm,
that's the whole point. That's literally the whole point.
yep.
General population sedentary people do not need to be drinking electrolytes and sports drinks. That's probably why they can't lose weight because they're
Mm-hmm.
consuming calories for no reason. Your kid needs those calories.
And again, they're made for sport,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
there's no
they're not for
guarantee.
you who's sitting on your couch. They're for people who are going out and doing high intensity activity that's draining their glycogen
Mhm.
stores.
And like even that, like I never, unless like I need those high sugar contents, like I tell my brother to just like put some salt, some diluting juice, and some water in a bowl, shake it, and that's your electrolytes. Like just have that. Like
Mm-hmm.
if he's got a big game or if he's traveling, then I'll be like Lucasade or like slag it off as much as you want. Like Prime does do electrolytes really well. It's just like some of the little nuances of it might not agree with everyone. Or like LMNT, that's a
Mm-hmm.
really good one. I've seen one recently as well. I think I got told about it. It's Thorn. Thorn?
Mm. Yeah, I like Element because it's salty. I think I tend to stay away from the sweeter ones.
This one too. This is a
Mm.
good one. Apparently, they even test. You know how like on lids there's that foamy part to protect the from the moisture. They
Mm-hmm.
test that as well.
Wow,
So they're very into testing everything that goes into their products.
that's good. Have you ever noticed that your female athletes need more salt?
Yes.
That's something that I've noticed a lot, especially with girls that are more petite, like tend to be like probably just like less available muscle mass, less stored glycogen to use. They get lightheaded faster. But I think I can think of like 4 or 5 girls off the top of my head who used to get like very, very lightheaded, gray, nauseous after especially sprints. Um, and then even just like table salt or
Hmm.
like an element, and then it like never happens again after they implement that. I just think it's so interesting. Maybe a
Sugar
blood
as
pressure
well is a big,
stabilization thing.
yeah. Sugar's a big one for that too. Like they're probably not. They probably don't have enough sugar to sustain what they're doing,
Hmm.
or glucose, whatever way you want to look at it. Yeah, like sometimes my partner does that a lot as well. Like she'll stand up too quickly and she goes all lightheaded, and I'm like,
Hmm.
let's get some electrolytes, let's get some salt and sugar in you. See which makes it better. Iron's a big one as well for females.
Hmm.
Like everything that goes on, you need extra iron.
Hmm. And even just to like when you get your CBC done, do you know how to read it? Or like because I had an athlete over the summer. She had like torn her labrum and was having a lot of like stomach and menstrual issues, so she was going to the doctor a lot. Um, and she went to the doctor and they were like, "Well, your iron is fine, but her ferritin was really really low." So it's like you can't just, I don't know. It's helpful to be able to look at a whole picture of something and to not just have it explained to you by your doctor. Um, and I think I just don't know why we don't know more about our bodies. When I
Mhm.
was going through college, a lot of what I was thinking of when I was sitting in class was, why doesn't everybody know this? Why doesn't everybody know what macronutrients are?
Yep.
or the even the can name like the parts of their own body and like what they do. It's interesting to me that so many people walk around like living as a human and not really knowing
Hmm.
how they exist really.
Yeah, but X's and Z's in maths, that's very important. Very
100%.
important.
Gosh. Yeah,
um,
like
as
wish we taught people how to like fuel
mm,
themselves properly, at least like just the nutrition front.
a lot of the issue with female athletes and just the female population as well is like not a lot of research gets done because the amount of unpredictable variables that there is. So like in research, you're seen as a little man, which you
Hmm.
get half of whatever we get.
Yeah.
Like this is something that when I was doing my research, I found quite weird and frustrating. Is like even if you go to like your GP, I don't know if that's the same as America. Like, do you have GPs, like general
Yeah.
practitioners? Yeah, but they will medicate you half of whatever a man gets
Hmm.
instead of being like, let's actually look at weight, height, and like actually medicate you to what you need.
Hmm. Like menstrual product absorbency wasn't even tested with real blood until last year.
I didn't know that one.
It's insane. Yeah, you can think of like so many instances of that, and
Do you want to know another frustrating one?
of course.
All gym equipment is based on a man's anatomy. Apart from the 15 kilogram bar,
Yeah.
and that's a
And
woman's
that's like
bar apparently.
if, if you go into a gym and sit on a machine, they're all built for men. They're built with a man's width in mind. Like we have a T-bar like
Mhm.
row in the gym, and girls can't use the handles because their hands are so far outside their body. Um, so yeah, that's another thing. Like the world of exercise is kind of male dominated, and all the research is oriented towards men. Um, but we do know like some cool things. Like women can perform closer to their 1 rep max for more repetitions because
If we
of
look at pound for pound
that.
in strength, women have stronger upper bodies than men. Pound for pound,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Upper
Um,
bodies, so like pull ups. Although like no one believes me, like women are biomechanically better at pull ups than men,
kind of makes sense. Doesn't feel that way when I do them, but
and that's the second. That's the comment I always get. But yeah, it's like yeah, this is why it was. It's very frustrating to do research because like you have to prove everything, and there's just nothing out there to prove it to. So you're kind of like, okay, this
mhm.
is cool.
And even if you look at studies like even around something specific like the menstrual cycle, and then you look at the methods, and nothing's been standardized for. Like
Mm.
women are on all different types of contraception. Some of them aren't on contraception. Yeah, just very interesting. But it's like because we have this variability inherently as women, then we just don't get studied. That's not fair.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Um, what would be a piece of advice that you would give new strength and conditioning coaches?
Be a sponge. Um, Connect with people in your industry who you look up to, whose training you see, and you're like, oh yeah, that's something like what I want to do. Like I want to do something to that caliber. Find a mentor, get involved. For me, I was just around the gym constantly, especially when I was interning. There's so much value in observing the way that other people do things, whether it's that you're going to take that for yourself or that you're going to note it and not repeat it.
Mm,
There's so much value in observing another coach and how they work. Um, and don't be afraid to mess up. Your stuff isn't going to be perfect the first time around. We're all works in progress. Your training should look different as you progress in your career. Yeah, don't be afraid to change.
yeah. I'll piggyback off that one. Look at your old programs and learn from them. Like,
Hmm. Run your own programs.
yes, yes, yes. Like, don't just program because you saw something on Instagram. Test it because chances
Hmm.
are it may not work. So you need to make adjustments because like, there's nothing worse than you implement something on an athlete and it's like, yeah, what's that doing? then you're like, and then like you're on the spot thinking of why you programmed that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think some of my early like inspiration was a lot from West Side, which is very intense. And I think that exercise selection wise and variability wise, I still like to steal a lot from Conjugate. But there's also like, and I'm not talking poorly about Louis. Louis's coaching style would not work on my athletes, you know. So you take what, like you were saying earlier, like you take what you see as most valuable and what you've seen work and what you trust, and bring it all together to build something really cool for your
Mhm.
athletes.
It's also like the ability to not be scared to mess up, like you've just mentioned. Like if something you've tested and it worked for you, if it doesn't work on an athlete, pivot. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no shame in pivoting from that. Like that is what you should be doing. If like, and again, going back to the periodization conversations, like periodization can only take you so far. Like if an athlete's injured or he can't do something one day, like you have to give him something else. Like that stimulus still has to be achieved somehow. Like this I've been talking about this recently, and it's like a lot of people like to go off percentages and RPEs, like specifically when you're lifting. Like that's great, but it's a very like black and white statement. So like if I have an athlete that, say we're on a super heavy week, right? And he comes in, he's not slept well, he's not hydrated, he's not ate anything all day. So I'm not getting that true 80% of him because like that's a stupid to make him do. It's going to put him in harm's way. So like
Mm-hmm.
let's look at 8% for what he can do right now.
Yeah.
Like even if that's 60% of what his 1 RM is, but that's his 80%, I'm still chasing that 80%. I'm still happy because he's at least pushed it to what he could do 80% wise,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also not pushing him to the point of burnout. So
Yeah.
like I'm happy. He's happy that he's not dying because I've made him do his true 80%. So it's kind of like adjust for the athlete that you have in that day.
100%. Like everything's relative. And again, I feel like that comes back to ego stuff. Like if you as a coach need your athletes so badly to hit this 87% number, why? Like
Mhm.
that's more about you than it is about them.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Really appreciate you for coming on today.
Of
Um,
course.
if you give people where they can find you.
For sure. My Instagram is Gianna Lifts. Feel free to message me through there, and I think we have a little like training form, that link in my bio, and then my email, should you wish to reach out, is gsull@ironworksperformance.com.
Perfect. Really appreciate you for coming on today.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Peace.